Dragged, Detained, Deported. The Rabiatu Kuyateh Deportation Saga sparks outrage and diplomatic firestorm. My fellow Sierra Leoneans, Africans at large, and members of our global diaspora, this is Inside Salone, and I am your host, Ahisatu Kamara Kargbo, bringing you a critical story that has shaken the conscience of our community and sparked widespread calls for justice, dignity, and accountability. On Wednesday, 12th November 2025, a deeply disturbing incident unfolded at the crossroads of international law, human rights, and state diplomacy. Madam Rabiatu Mariama Kuyateh, a Sierra Leonean national deported from the United States, was forcibly handled and dragged by Ghanaian immigration officers during what should have been a routine transit through Ghana en route to her home country.
Mohammed Aghali's mom is his best friend. The two bought this home together in Bowie, Maryland, and he's now worried she won't return after being deported earlier this month.
I felt defeated, felt like I failed my mom.
You felt like you failed her?
I felt like I failed her just because I'm really, doing anything for my mom.
He says his mom, Rabiatu Kuyateh, came to Maryland 30 years ago fleeing Sierra Leone's civil war. Mohammed was born here in the U.S. and says his grandparents joined them here and became citizens. Kuyateh never became a citizen, but was a nurse with a work permit and was required to check in with ICE every year. But things quickly changed during her July check-in.
They called her to the back, and they said, yeah, Rabiatu, you have an order of removal, so, we're detaining you. I mean, my heart just broke.
Did you think that you would see your mother again when they took her that day?
Yes, I was optimistic, I was hoping I'd be able to, see what we could do about getting her released that day.
But he would not see her face-to-face again. After several days, she was moved to an ICE facility in Louisiana, where she was held for months, according to her attorney.
Honestly, I don't think anyone expected her to be detained just because nothing had changed with her circumstances.
Immigration attorney Hannah Bridges represents Kuyateh and says while she was held in Louisiana this past September, a judge granted an order saying she could not be sent back to Sierra Leone, where she says her client had been tortured. Bridges says the U.S. immediately began exploring other countries to send her to, which she also tried to fight in court with requests for hearings.
Those requests went unacknowledged.
Are you concerned that her civil rights were violated during this process?
Absolutely.
How so?
She should have been given notice and an opportunity to seek protection from removal to a third country. And the government had multiple opportunities to do this.
Bridges says earlier this month, Kuyateh was flown from the U.S. to Ghana, a country she's never been to before.
Hi, Mom.
Mohammed called his mother in Africa while we were with him. She says her wrists and ankles are swollen from being shackled for the 10-hour flight. She said some others had it even worse.
There was another guy on the floor. That guy, they trained him from the head down to the feet. They said, if you don't cooperate with us, that's how we're going to tie you.
Kuyateh told the I-team she and other deportees were sent to a hotel in Ghana. She says she was there for 6 days before this happened. A bus arrived to take her to Sierra Leone, even though an American judge ordered she could not be sent there. Her attorney says she was ultimately sent there anyway, although she resisted.
That's when they dragged me, so they bumped the back of my head.
The I-team obtained multiple videos of the dragging that were sent to her family. Kuyateh believes the people in the green uniforms worked for Ghana's government. These are pictures of some of the injuries she says she sustained after the dragging. The video went viral overseas, and several media outlets in West Africa reported that the Sierra Leone High Commission, which is like its embassy in Ghana, said it's aware of the incident and will investigate. We asked the Ministry of the Interior for Ghana about this. They acknowledged our email, but didn't answer our questions. We received no response from Sierra Leone officials.
I consider America my home. It's like I built relationships there.
Kuyateh says she's safe for now in an undisclosed location in Sierra Leone, as her family sits in the home she owns in Bowie, wondering what her future holds and if she will ever come back again.
Do you feel like the U.S. government has failed your mom?
Yes, 100%.
We reached out to Maryland's ICE for comment several days ago. They asked that we share our videos of the dragging, which we did.
They still have not responded to our questions about the case. In September, the U.S. Department of Justice argued in a federal court that it had no power to control how another country treats deportees. It said that Ghana had pledged to the U.S. it wouldn't send the deportees back to their home countries. The United Nations Human Rights Office has called on Ghana to stop deporting people from the U.S. to their home countries if U.S. courts have said it's dangerous for them to return. And with Kuyateh, she was the primary caregiver for both of her parents, her mom and dad. They thought, the whole family thought, when she got on that plane that was headed to Ghana, that she was going to be released and coming home. So everyone involved in this was confused and shocked and just wondering what can be done at this point.
And at this point, is there hope? How are they feeling now?
They're feeling hopeless. And what her son said there about feeling like the country has let his mother down. During COVID, she's a nurse. She's worked in long-term care facilities and also in homes and worked throughout COVID and did so much for the people of this country. And she said she feels like this is her home, and now she's been taken away from her home. She left Sierra Leone and didn't want to, but had to, for her own safety. So this has been a very difficult situation for all involved, but it gave us an opportunity to see what's happening with these third country deportations and just the conditions that people are being flown in. It is, it's definitely an issue.
Just shocking to see that video and then to hear her voice described.
The incident, captured on camera and widely circulated online, has ignited public outrage both in Ghana and across Sierra Leone. The shocking video and public outcry. In the video, which has since gone viral on platforms like Facebook and WhatsApp, Madam Kuyateh is seen resisting force as she is dragged along the floor and then lifted by multiple officers into a vehicle. Her clothing is visibly disheveled and her voice audibly distressed. This is not a clip for the faint-hearted. This is a scene that evokes memories of the darker chapters of our history, one where Africans were treated as less than human. The video has provoked reactions not just from ordinary Sierra Leoneans, but also from regional human rights defenders and advocates of ECOWAS free movement protocols. High Commission responds. Sierra Leone demands accountability. In response, the Sierra Leone High Commission in Accra, led by High Commissioner Mohamed Hassan Kaisamba, issued a strong press release dated 13th November 2025, expressing grave concern over the treatment of Madam Kuyateh. According to the statement, the High Commission confirmed Kuyateh's identity and the authenticity of the video, initiated high-level diplomatic engagements with the government of Ghana, communicated concerns to Ghana's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Minister for Interior, and Ghana Immigration Service, GIS leadership, demanded assurances of her safety, a full investigation, and a reconsideration of the deportation process, reiterated that access to Madam Kuyateh was denied on the day of her removal, despite multiple interventions. The High Commission stressed that the incident had caused understandable distress within our community and beyond, and emphasized the need for clarification, accountability, and preventive action. Source: Sierra Leone High Commission press release, Accra, Nov 13, 2025. Ghanaian government responds. Investigation launched. In a swift reaction to the growing controversy, Ghana's Minister for the Interior, Muntaka Mohamed Mubarak, confirmed that an internal investigation has been launched. In a press briefing, Minister Mubarak called the incident unfortunate and said the Comptroller General of the Ghana Immigration Service had been directed to submit a full report. Minister Mubarak also suggested in his remarks that Madam Kuyateh may have been suffering a medical emergency at the time, hinting that her behavior could have stemmed from health-related distress. However, Sierra Leone's High Commissioner was quick to challenge this narrative, firmly stating that no official medical report has been shared and cautioning against speculative statements without verified facts. This issue is now not just a matter of deportation, it is a question of diplomatic integrity, human rights, and cross-border accountability. Africa-wide comparison, deportation, and dignity. Let us now zoom out beyond the Ghana-Sierra Leone bilateral context and look at the Africa-wide implications. This is not the first time that deportations have triggered controversy in Africa. In Nigeria, similar deportation videos from Libya sparked mass protests and diplomatic confrontations over the treatment of migrants. South Africa's Department of Home Affairs has repeatedly been called out by civil society groups for deportation methods deemed inhumane, especially concerning Zimbabwean nationals. Kenya's deportation of opposition figure Miguna in 2018 remains a landmark case in regional deportation politics. These incidents suggest a pattern that many African nations, while advocating for African unity and free movement under AU and ECOWAS charters, still engage in deportation practices that ignore the dignity of the individual. This undermines not only the spirit of Pan-Africanism, but also international legal obligations, including the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, the UN Convention on the Protection of the Rights of All Migrant Workers, and ECOWAS's own Protocol on Free Movement of Persons. Forward-looking approach, preventing the next crisis. So what now? The Sierra Leone High Commission has committed to closely monitoring the Ghanaian investigation and ensuring that transparency and accountability are upheld. But this case reveals a deeper gap in the regional protection of deportees and migrants in transit. We must now ask, where are the ECOWAS observers in this process? Shouldn't there be a regional deportation code of conduct signed and monitored by member states? What frameworks exist to protect deportees in transit, and why were they not triggered in Madam Kuyateh's case? The truth is, Africa needs a continental protocol, one that sets minimum standards for handling deportees, including medical checks, diplomatic access, legal representation, and family notifications. Voices from the diaspora. Diaspora communities have not remained silent. In online forums and WhatsApp groups from Maryland to McKinney, the name Rabiatu Kuyateh has become symbolic of the vulnerability of African deportees, especially women. Some have called for a regional summit on deportation practices, while others have urged the African Union to establish a deportee protection and monitoring unit. Several Sierra Leoneans abroad are now using the hashtag #JusticeForRabiatu, pushing for justice not just in this case, but for the thousands of undocumented migrants and deportees facing similar threats across the continent. Diplomatic ripples, bilateral trust on the line. The High Commission's firm stance has undoubtedly added diplomatic weight to the issue. By escalating the matter directly to the Ghanaian Ministers of Foreign Affairs and Interior, the government of Sierra Leone has signaled that this was not a routine immigration affair. It was a violation of dignity and access rights. As stated in the official press release, dated 13th of November 2025, the High Commission emphasized, "Our position was made unequivocally clear at every stage. The safety and welfare of Sierra Leoneans in Ghana remain our utmost priority. Yet it is that very clarity and diplomatic engagement that throws the actions of the Ghana Immigration Service into sharper scrutiny." If the mission's position was clearly communicated, why then was Madam Kuyateh allegedly dragged out of her hotel room without medical evaluation, consular presence, or due process? This case sets a dangerous precedent, one where African citizens may be treated like stateless persons when caught in the machinery of cross-border deportation. Legal and human rights context, ECOWAS and the African Charter. Madam Kuyateh's deportation was reportedly executed under a U.S.-Ghana agreement on returning nationals. But once she arrived in Ghana, her status shifted from being a deportee to a foreign national in transit. This distinction is crucial. Under ECOWAS Protocol AP 1579, citizens of member states have the right to enter, reside, and establish within any ECOWAS country without harassment, provided they comply with basic legal formalities. Furthermore, Under the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, Article 12 protects the right to freedom of movement and prohibits collective expulsion or inhumane treatment of non-citizens. By forcibly removing Madam Kuyateh without due diplomatic oversight, Ghanaian immigration authorities may have contravened both ECOWAS and African Union legal norms, especially if no valid deportation order under Ghanaian domestic law was issued in her name. No medical evaluation or due process was followed. No humanitarian exceptions were considered given her visible distress. Legal observers are now calling for the ECOWAS Community Court of Justice to consider opening an amicus brief or advisory opinion should the case remain unresolved diplomatically. The role of ECOWAS and the African Union. A deafening silence. At this stage, one glaring omission in the regional response is the absence of any statement from ECOWAS. For a regional body that prides itself on integration and free movement, its silence is both troubling and telling. Let us remember, ECOWAS was created to prevent exactly this type of treatment, where African citizens become pawns between state bureaucracies. If Madam Kuyateh, a Sierra Leonean, cannot safely transit through Ghana without being treated as a threat, what does that say about the implementation gap in our regional charters? Likewise, the African Union's Commission on Human and People's Rights should not remain mute. This is an ideal opportunity to reaffirm the continent's commitment to human dignity, cross-border respect, and continental solidarity. Diaspora advocacy groups demand independent oversight. Meanwhile, in the wake of the video's virality, several diaspora-based advocacy groups, including the Sierra Leone Union in North America, Africans in Transit Advocacy Network, ATAN, and Ghanaians for Migrant Justice, have begun circulating petitions calling for 1. An independent fact-finding mission. 2. Public release of the Ghana Immigration Service internal report. 3. Establishment of a joint Sierra Leone-Ghana Committee on the handling of African deportees. 4. Introduction of video surveillance oversight mechanisms in deportation operations. Their argument is simple. If the Ghana Immigration Service had acted within legal and moral boundaries, then transparency should not be a threat. They are also pushing for a public apology and compensation for Madam Kuyateh, depending on the outcome of the ongoing investigation. Sierra Leone government's responsibility doesn't end in Freetown. The government of Sierra Leone must also take a hard look inward. Deportees arriving home often face stigma, limited reintegration support, and economic exclusion. Madam Kuyateh's case must be a wake-up call. Not just about diplomatic protection abroad, but about creating robust systems to support citizens in distress. Questions that remain unanswered include: has Madam Kuyateh received post-deportation psychological or medical care? Was she offered legal representation or advocacy support during or after her ordeal? What follow-up will the government pursue to ensure she is not further victimized now that she's back on Sierra Leonean soil? This is not just a story about a woman being dragged. It is about a continental system dragging its feet on protecting its people. Gender and deportation, the silenced trauma of African women. Let us be honest, had this been a man, this would still be a serious case. But the fact that it involved a woman, visibly distressed, possibly disoriented, and handled with such aggression by uniformed officers, adds a deeper layer of trauma and injustice. Gender-based advocates have rightfully raised alarm bells over the treatment of Madam Kuyateh. The manner in which she was dragged on the floor, arms flailing, her body exposed, while male officers hovered over her, calls into question protocols for handling female detainees. Where were the female officers during this process? Was any gender-sensitive protocol applied? Was she offered a mental health evaluation or a trauma counselor, especially if the authorities suspected she was experiencing a medical or psychological episode, as suggested by Ghana's Interior Minister? So far, there has been no evidence presented publicly to confirm that any such safeguards were in place. This raises real fears that Madam Kuyateh's ordeal may be part of a wider pattern of neglect toward vulnerable African women caught in cross-border enforcement webs. It is crucial that Ghana Immigration Services and the Ministry of Interior release not only the findings of the internal probe, but also a public account of how they intend to improve the humane treatment of women in custody. Psychological fallout. What happens after the cameras stop? We must also ask ourselves, what happens after the dragging, after the forced flight, after the diplomatic statements? Deportation, especially under violent circumstances, inflicts deep psychological wounds, shame, disorientation, identity trauma, fear, and anxiety. The Sierra Leonean government has not yet confirmed whether Madam Kuyateh has received post-deportation support, whether from the Ministry of Social Welfare, the Immigration Department, or independent trauma specialists. More broadly, how prepared is Sierra Leone to receive deportees who come back under such traumatizing conditions? It is not enough to be repatriated. One must also be rehabilitated, respected, reassured. And that requires an interministerial approach, not just foreign affairs, but also Ministry of Health and Sanitation for trauma and medical care, Ministry of Social Welfare for reintegration, Legal Aid Board for representation and civil rights defense, and civil society partners for long-term support and advocacy. Global context, African deportees caught in geopolitical crossfire. This case also shines a light on a lesser-known yet growing trend: African nationals being deported through third-party transit countries due to bilateral or trilateral repatriation agreements. As in Madam Kuyateh's case, deportees from Europe or the United States are sometimes routed through African states like Ghana, Ethiopia, or Senegal, either due to logistics, expired travel documents, or existing diplomatic accords. However, such stopovers have serious legal and ethical implications, especially when the transit country becomes a second site of trauma. In 2022, Cameroonian and Nigerian deportees sent via Niger complained of mistreatment in detention while awaiting paperwork clearance. In 2023, Human Rights Watch raised alarm over secretive handover practices between European border agencies and North African countries. And now in 2025, the Sierra Leone-Ghana-US triangle is under the microscope. The African Union and ECOWAS must urgently develop transit and handover standards for deportation corridors that pass through member states. Otherwise, we risk turning African airports and hotels into unregulated black boxes of forced removals without accountability. Media framing: the power and danger of viral images. The footage of Madam Kuyateh being dragged was initially dismissed by some as just another deportation clip. But its emotional power, her screams, her struggle, the coldness of uniformed hands pulling her, cut through the digital noise. It forced a conversation that official statements alone could not ignite. Still, we must be cautious. As we fight for justice, we must also respect her privacy and agency. Replaying the clip endlessly may amplify awareness, but it also risks re-traumatizing her and others. Moving forward, the media must balance exposure with empathy and ensure Madam Kuyateh's voice is centered in the narrative, not exploited. Let us not forget, she is not a symbol, she is a person. Calls to action. What comes next? Pressure is mounting. The Sierra Leone Parliamentary Committee on Foreign Affairs is reportedly considering summoning the foreign minister for a closed-door briefing. Ghana's civil society organizations, including the Human Rights Advocacy Center, have issued statements urging for transparency and restitution. International rights groups like Amnesty International and Refugees International are beginning to take note and explore investigative briefs. But what we need now is clear timelines. When will the Ghana Immigration Service complete its report? Will the findings be made public or remain confidential? Will Madam Kuyateh be invited to give testimony? And what disciplinary or policy reforms will follow? We will keep you updated as more developments unfold. Final reflections. Advice to African citizens. To our fellow citizens across Africa and the diaspora, this incident is a reminder that 1. Know your rights. Whether you're traveling, deported, or detained, your human dignity must not be violated. Keep physical and digital copies of your travel documents and local consulate contacts. 2. Record, report, resist injustice. If you or someone you know is facing deportation or mistreatment, document everything. Videos, voice notes, and written complaints have become powerful tools in demanding justice. 3. Demand accountability peacefully. Engage with local embassies, write petitions, and support advocacy organizations that hold governments to their obligations under regional and international law. 4. Support returnees and deportees. Do not stigmatize those who are forcibly returned. They are not criminals. They are citizens, often victims of a broken global system. Show compassion, not judgment. Guidance to African leaders and institutions. To our African leaders, this is your moment to demonstrate that African lives matter, not just in speeches, but in policy and practice. 1. Respect and enforce ECOWAS and AU protocols. Free movement must come with free protection. Protocols that exist on paper must be reflected in police stations, airports, and detention centers. 2. Establish clear deportee handling procedures, especially for transits. Countries must not allow foreign security forces to exploit their territories as dumping grounds for deportees. 3. Fund consular protection programs. African missions abroad need stronger budgets and trained staff to support vulnerable nationals like Madam Kuyateh. 4. Develop regional safeguards. Create an ECOWAS deportee monitoring office to ensure humane treatment and prevent future violations. 5. Train immigration and police forces in human rights. Force should be a last resort, not the first response. Deportees are not threats. They are people. Summary of key messages. The incident involving Madam Rabiatu Kuyateh was not an isolated deportation. It was a failure of dignity, diplomacy, and duty. The Sierra Leone High Commission in Ghana responded firmly, but was denied access, raising serious concerns about Ghana's immigration protocols. Ghana's Ministry of the Interior has launched an internal investigation, which must be transparent, time-bound, and made public. The Sierra Leonean public, diaspora groups, and regional human rights advocates have rallied in support, demanding justice, reforms, and safeguards. This case reveals a dangerous loophole in Africa's handling of transit deportees, particularly women, and underscores the urgent need for ECOWAS and AU engagement. The media has a powerful role to play, but must wield that power with empathy and accuracy. This case is a reminder that dignity must never be negotiable, even in deportation. Africa must protect her own, whether at home or abroad. Here at The Bold African Voice, we will continue to follow this story until justice is done. I'm Ahisatu Kamara Kargbo. Thank you for watching. Like, share, subscribe, and tap the bell so you never miss a voice that matters. Because together, we make the difference.